guess y'all seen where Robert Duvall passed away. He was one of my favorites. We watched Secondhand Lines last night. Yeah. All right. This is Amos, I guess it's part 21. And I'm calling this a messenger to the collective. This is our final episode, final lesson in the prophet Amos. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I hope you've learned a bunch. I have, going through the study. But today's kind of a wrap up, getting it all together, the overall kind of picture here of Amos. Now, Amos, he's from a small town in Judah called Tekoa. This is in the 8th century BC. He scratches out a living as a herdsman, and a pruner of trees. I know when you go look, it says a dealt in sycamore fruit or something like that, but gatherer, yeah, he was kind of the Hebrew language. He was a tree pruner, and that was very, if you're going to have fruit, olives or, whatever, like apples, if you don't prune your trees. And who does this kind of work? Not high society people. I can see him doing sheep, herdsman of sheep, and I can see him taking some side jobs to make ends meet. So he's scratching out a living here. And his prophecies didn't emerge because he was the son of a prophet. Remember, we had a lesson about that. His dad wasn't a prophet. And what son of the prophet meant, like he didn't follow another prophet around in what we might call the school of the prophets. He wasn't educated in the field of prophecy. But from his foundational perspective, and his foundational perspective was as a peasant, as a poor folk. So and this is important because he's looking at the world through the lens of being a poor person. Now that is so important. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I can promise you, we look at the world from being a white people in America perspective. We don't look at it from being a poor person in Africa or maybe a poor person in the inner city. We don't. We look at it, that's our perspective, so we develop our views. So God uses this guy who is poor, who's coming with his perspective to prophesy to this nation. Now, people at the top, opposite the peasant here, with their bottom of the food chain, people at the top think things are the way they are for good reason, right? But poor folk know down in their bones that things ain't as they should be. Things ain't right. This is not even. It's not fair. Now, Amos, he doesn't start out claiming the title of a prophet. And since he didn't do that, you'd think the other prophets would have written him off as some uneducated naysayer, right? You look at it, it's like, who are you? How do the people dress today? They pull up in fancy cars, they got their suits, they got all this other stuff, and if somebody poor with dirty fingers comes on the scene, we're not going to listen to them, Tim. They got no clout. Look at them. God surely didn't call them. But nevertheless, Amos is a very important voice in Israel. Now, most scholars believe that he set the tone and manner of a writing prophet. You gotta understand this. He showed the other prophets how to do it and gave them permission to publicly criticize their own society. I didn't think he was allowed to do that. Now listen, let me say that again. He showed the other prophets how to do it and gave them permission to publicly criticize their own society. Now, this is very important. God called Amos, during the reign of Jeroboam II. Remember, we've talked about that from 1 Kings and all of that. Now, why was that so important? Because Israel, at the time under Jeroboam, the northern tribes, Jeroboam II, they are in the height of their greatest territory expansion and prosperity. Now imagine, they're gaining territory left and right. Man, everybody's got a whole lot of money. They're at the peak. Does this sound familiar? I told you, Amos' contemporary, greatest economy in the history of the world, and God calls Amos right into the middle of it. And most in Israel interpreted their success, now where do you think they got their success from? As a sign of God's special favor. But Amos saw their society for what it was. I mean, that is so important, isn't it? So important. Amos preached against the people's transgression, their complacency. You know what that means, their complacency. Their reliance on military might. Does this sound contemporary? Absolutely. Their injustices in social dealing. Their immorality. Their shallow religion. And he was especially harsh in criticizing those who squeezed lives. Let me say it this way. They were living the life of luxury out of an unjust system. Does that sound like everything's in my favor, Tim, and I got the right people in the right place, and I don't pay what you pay, and I mean, who cares about the bottom feeders over here? We're God's special people. We're on top. God made it that way, and here we are. You remember in Amos chapter 4, let me read this verse 1. Hear this, you cows of Bashan, who are on the mountain of Samaria, who exploit the poor, who oppress the needy and say to their husbands, bring me a drink that we may drink. Listen up, you cows of Bashan, living in the mountain of Samaria, oppressing the needy, crushing the poor, calling out to your husbands, bring you some tea. All of that put him in conflict with the religious authority. Put Amos in conflict with him. And you know what they did? When you're in conflict, I mean, they kicked him out of the royal sanctuary. Commanded him, don't come back, don't prophesy here no more. Don't you come back. You remember that? I think they might have wrote that song, don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. They wrote that song for Amos. Not really, but it would fit. But he, and you understand here, it's the same today. You call out something, and the people want to kick you out and say, you can't do that. Now remember, he's coming right into the height of their prosperity. But thank God Amos didn't listen to him. He returned to Judah, and he wrote down the essence of his public preaching. That's why we have the book of Amos. He goes back and he writes it down, his experience down. Now, this prophetic culture smashing, if you will, it was largely unrecognized in the West. And when I say the West, I'm talking us, the West, all of the West, for most of the next 3,000 years. In other words, we only listened to kings and bishops and, presidents and senators. We only listen to those people up here. Why are we going to listen to a guy that's herding sheep and pruning trees? What is he? We don't listen to them. But now if a guy's got a bishop, if he's an apostle, all the titles that everybody has, they never notice the lay folk. Or let me use a word they would never listen to. Women. Oh, my God. Oh, we're not going to listen to them. They would never listen to a farmer. What does a farmer know? Common folk weren't seen as important. Still ain't. They weren't seen as influential. Still not. despite all that Jesus taught us about the little ones. Remember how important he said. Jesus said the least will be first, the last will be first. And I mean, that's kind of the same word. Now, there's this Peter Drucker. He's a guru in management, if you will. He said this: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, in a similar way, I believe that culture eats religion for lunch. Culture eats religion for lunch. And by that I mean, you got to hear this, our beliefs are determined much more by our dominant ways of life and our culture influences more than by what we say we believe religiously. So in other words, culture is forming your religion. Culture runs the show far more than religion runs the show. Culture does. That's why people do what they do, and we got them all reaching around. Evangelical vote, black vote, we got them all reaching around because culture shapes that. Not this. Culture. I'll throw a couple out here. Roman Catholic is far more Roman than Catholic. They started out Catholic, one church. But then what happened? They become Roman. And the American church is far more American than church. You see, so the culture. I'm still trying to work this point out here. Every viewpoint is a view from a point. That's pretty easy, isn't it? Every viewpoint is a view from a point. And we had best know ours. Best know our own. Where you start. Because where you start greatly determines the questions that you ask or don't ask. Determines the direction you set and the goals that you hope to achieve. Truth don't appear like an apparition of low-hanging fruit in some celestial garden. It always comes wrapped in the society and historical moment that produced it. Now, that's true of the prophets' writing as it is for us. Each one of them is situated in a historical moment. Each one of them, I'm talking Jeremiah, Isaiah, Amos, Jonah. You know, the list goes on in their cultural setting. Paul, same kind of thing. I mean, right there in that cultural setting. Look what Paul was doing to start with. Saul of Tarsus, what was he doing? He thought he was doing right by putting these Christ followers to death. Because, I mean, he was hardcore wanting to follow Yahweh, God. He was hardcore that way. So it was into that setting. And each one of these prophets writing is that way. Each one of them is situated in a historical moment that is crucial for understanding them. Remember, Jeremiah is coming up, and remember Jeremiah is telling them guys, he's like, guys, I want to tell you something. You're going into captivity. I'm telling you, it's over. And when you get there, here's how you're going to live your life. You're going to be there for 70 years. I'm telling you guys, no need to pray about it. Pack your bags, you're going. Isaiah prophesied at a different time. Amos at a different time. These things is what was going on. So cultural settings is crucial. Theoretical truths about the authority of the priesthood or the unfairness of taxes must always be seen in the context of their moment, of their society, of their audience. Otherwise, we'll interpret the text in a vacuum or in our own limited vision. Limited vision. I thought about this the other day, God told Abraham, lift up your eyes, and we always quote, lift up, see if you can count the stars, but, You know what he's telling him right there? And I think it's still true for us today. Lift up your eyes, lift up your eyes. You know, one of the Psalms, lift up your eyes into the hills and lift up, look up, your redemption draweth nigh. You know what God is telling us? See the bigger picture. Because right now you're seeing the picture. Now this is hard because you know what? Most people's picture they see is a view from my point, and since I know everything and I understand everything, there is no other view from your point. Your view from your point doesn't matter. The only view that matters is the view from my point. But God calls up because most of us are sitting here and there's a people down here, and God calls the voice from down here to come right into where you are and give God's view. Okay? So we don't like that. That's what's going on here. And when we don't understand that and we just see it in a vacuum, in other words, it's just my view from my point's all that matters, this leads to horrible misunderstandings, or even worse. And that's how we arrive, sometimes for centuries, at self-interested interpretations. Like I said, sometimes we think, hey, these things only started, this is something new. And you can look, and I've heard people say, well, we got to get back to the old church. I'm telling you, the church went off kilter 500 years ago. 500 years ago. I mean, think about that. So what we think is this view, man, at 500 years, you can get way off base. You can, when you do that, it's allowed us to justify prejudices, right? I mean, when you grow up thinking, hey, God made people black and he cursed them, and then you believe that, and then all of a sudden we can justify slavery and treatment of different people because we're the preferred race and God is a white guy. We can justify slavery, and we can justify outlandish wealth or whatever else is preferred to keep my place safe in society. Or more commonly, we read the whole thing, we read this whole Bible in terms of our own private journey towards salvation. Salvation that's always talked about in the Bible, Denise, was for the whole people. God didn't go down to Egypt and say, you know what, if you'll confess, I'll save you, and if you'll confess, No, he brought them out because they're his people, and nothing has changed today. We try to go through this and make people understand we are one body, a body of Christ. I mean, God deals with us as one people. But for how many years have we there was a personal Savior? Things are personal, don't get that wrong, but it ain't about me or it ain't about you. It's my goodness. When we lose the bias toward the bottom, it's often because we never got on the right biblical trajectory to start with. Because truthfully, if we look in the Bible, okay, who are we? Tim, I'm going to look through the Bible. Who are we? We are far more Egyptians than we were slaves in Egypt. We are far more Babylonians than we ever were slaves in Babylonian captivity. We are far more Romans, far more Greeks than Hebrew slaves seeking freedom. That's the truth of the matter. So we're going to have that view. If truth doesn't touch you deeply, then how can it be truth at all? It must show itself in a specific context. Now, Amos, in this, he lists the cities. Remember, we went through them in our first lesson. He mentions Damascus. He mentions Gaza. He mentions Tyre. He mentions Edom. He mentions Ammon. He mentions Moab. All for crimes. Now, we don't get a specific list of their crimes, but now remember, all of these were Gentile cities. The original readers during this time, they would have known what the crimes of Damascus was. They would have known what Gaza was guilty of, and Tyre and Edom. They would have known. And a true prophet names evil where it's festering. But Amos doesn't stay in his anger and threat of punishment forever. He transforms his anger into regenerating, creative energy. And after his judgments, after his warnings, after his threats, we see him moving to a sadness and repeating 5 times that the people have failed to respond to God's outreach. God is calling. This is so sad. It's like God didn't call you once. God has reached out to you 5 times. And this saddens him. And at this juncture, he's more disappointed than angry. And sometimes he even breaks into praise in it. And Amos, he grows into this mystic poet right before our eyes, balancing the initial anger with reverence. And see, that's what I love about this, because yes, he gets angry. He's got a right to be angry. But at the same time, he begins to balance this with this beautiful poetry. You cows of Bashan. You can just see it all. Tell your husband to bring you something to drink, and look how you're treating other people. And then, he just, this great balance. A second lesson that we draw from Amos, he issues his prophecy to the collective instead of to individuals. Even when he singles out the temple priest, Amaziah, and King Jeroboam, they are stand-ins. You know what I mean? Type and shadow, stand-ins, maybe a better word. They're stand-ins for the 2 elite groups. The 2 elite groups, who were they? The rulers and the priest. How would we say that today? Well, you got all the politicians in government over here, and then you got all the Christian people that's backing them up over here. Those were the 2 stand-ins. And it's those that Amos implicates as part of the corrupt power system. I told you Amos was very contemporary. And Amos's judgments are clearly directed at the group, the culture, the collective, the society. Now, most collectives are content to place evil on individuals. No value in blaming a few bad actors. And you know what that's called is scapegoating. That's a lesson for another day. But culture and systems are what create the large-scale evils that threaten us. Cultures and systems. These large-scale evils that threaten us, like what? Like poverty, like war, like destroying rivers and pollution. All kinds of things, right? And see, they put you in the kind of, you go, well, you're a tree hugger, and you're all of that. We have to be honest and look around and say, man, our planet's a mess. It really is. And religion, real religion, James used the word. I know that word has been hijacked to be a horrible word, but it's still a good word. Pure and undefiled religion. James uses it, so let's put it in the right perspective here. Religion must address collective evil. I don't know, sometimes you think, well, not. I would say this, did Jesus call it out? Nothing will ever change if we merely convert or imprison or judge bad guys. That's what we do. And we think, well, that's a bad guy, that's a bad. Have we ever thought maybe the system Maybe the system is what's produced this. These isms, the whole system. Even though Jesus healed individuals, he at the same time, now you got to hear this, critique the systems that made them need the healing. Now think about that. Now Jesus could come along and heal cancer, right? And at the same time critique the system that caused the cancer. See, that's something that we leave out, Denise. We just like, well, no. But somewhere along the lines, there's something somewhere in your lifestyle, something you're eating, something you're not eating, something you're doing that is causing you to be sick. But we don't see it, and we don't call it out. And Jesus is doing both at the same time. And it's hard, again, for us to see that the system, I mean, look at our healthcare system. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, look at the system. Jesus comes on the scene and look at the system. There's a man chained up in a graveyard. Now, tell me how good your system is. You got to chain a man up, and you would think, that is crazy. Do we not do the same thing? Well, Tim, we can lock him up over here. Why? He's crazy. And he's like, what? See, your society is producing these kind of people. Our society is producing drug addicts, producing autism, producing all this other. You don't address the system. You just lock them up in a cage. We read it in the Bible, and we think, oh, my God. We still do the same thing today. We haven't. Like I said, 3,000 years, nobody has called it out in the West. We still do it. We got different names for it. Why were the women Jesus loved so often adulterers and prostitutes? I mean, think about this, because they didn't have a system that took care of the women. So what happened if their husband died? Man, I'm telling you what, and you remember in Israel, God put a law down there, at least go marry your brother. Why was that? To protect the name? I mean, there's something about looking after the women. I mean, what did James tell us? Visit the fatherless and the widows. But now these widows and these people, they can't get a job, they can't do this, they can't do that, so their only source of income is being a prostitute. And then what's the religious people do? Look down on them for being a prostitute. And he says, look at your system. Your system created this. So he wasn't going in saying, you bunch of prostitutes, you adulterers. No, he's going in there with grace and compassion, because he knows the system has made them that way. Why the woman with the issue of blood gives all her money to doctors. Does this still happen today? People are going to the doctors, giving all that they have, and what do? They come away worse. It's the system. I mean, you can look at the miracles that Jesus did and go, wow, for 5 minutes. But when you start to ask, why was the healing needed, you have a whole new way of seeing what needs to change. So what do? How do we look at it? Then we can say, you know what, Tim, it's too big to change. We can't do nothing. Let's just get out of here. Because it's too hard. It's too hard. We can't change it. It's too big to change. Like you said, when you start to ask these questions, you see you have a whole new way of seeing what needs to change, which was the bigger power structure. The institutionalized evil that no longer look like evil. I mean, it's okay if you go to the doctor and spend all you have. It's okay. It's all right. We don't care. Man, I hope you get better insurance. Who cares? It's institutional. We don't care. We don't see the structural sins here. The collective unconscious, which is often better exposed by art, by music, by even movies, way better than by preachers, because preachers mostly miss the point. And this concentration on the collectives changes our moral focus entirely. Remember, a viewpoint is a view from a point. That changes our whole perspective, our whole moral focus entirely. And if we don't recognize that evil first and foundationally resides in the group, instead of pointing out a few individuals, then we will condemn or forgive the few bad apples, thinking they are the problem. But too often the sins we condemn in the individual are admired at the corporate level. So we say this: killing is wrong. Killing is wrong. Everybody agrees killing is wrong, but war is good. Well, how's that? Killing is wrong, war is good. Greed is wrong. Greed is wrong. Nobody likes greed. But luxury and capitalism are the ideas to be sought after. Pride is bad, but nationalism is admirable. None of that is in the Bible. Envy is sin, but advertising is our way of life. Sloth is sin. Does it not say that in the Bible? Sloth. But wealthy people don't work. But they're admired. You see, we got a whole upside down system. We live under conflicted morality. The view from the bottom helps us escape this tendency. I mean, a critique of capitalism is absolutely, probably lose more people, is absolutely unacceptable in America. But how about in Guatemala? When I say Guatemala, I'm talking about one of the banana republics that absolutely got wiped out because of capitalism. Not there, but in America. Because a few people got filthy rich while we destroyed a whole company. So go ask the Guatemalans what they think of capitalism. You see, a viewpoint is a view from a point. Now, the church has been trying for centuries to save individuals while ignoring the corrupt system in which the individuals operate. But God deals with the whole. God deals with the whole. But our egos keep us lost in the small parts that we think we can control. We still have millions of Christians right now that condone violence, that condone greed, that condone poverty, that condone prejudice. The point is, the prophets approached evil from an entirely different perspective. Amos calls out the cows of Bashan, not just a single lady living in luxury while the poor starves. He's calling out the system. And the prophets learn that it is social sin that destroys society. Social sins. It's social sin that destroys our environment, our planet. Social sin brings us to war. It causes this immense wealth to be concentrated in a few. It brings us to celebrity worship. It brings us to the pursuit of fame and fortune, this income inequality. It brings us to denial of common truth. Religion and God are meant to keep us living in the big picture. As I said, Abraham, lift up your eyes, as we're called. Look, live in the bigger picture. The big picture. That bigger picture, that generous state of mind. The big picture, the generous state of mind, which could also be called the kingdom of God. Now, the prophets found the truth. Found it in questions of love. Amos's emphasis is clearly against temple priests, kings, luxury, and for the common people, justice. And Christians, sadly, almost know nothing of the prophet Amos. The reason they don't know anything about the prophet Amos, I told you when I began this lesson, the only thing I knew about Amos was he was the reason we can't have musical instruments in the church like David did. Anything else I didn't know about. But they know nothing about Amos because of our individualistic values. It's all about me, I say, not society. We don't look at society. Like I said, getting people to think that, hey, you're a church here in Richlands in Tazewell County. You're bearing the responsibility of Tazewell County, but nobody wants that. Everybody just wants to say, well, it ain't my fault. I didn't do it. They did it. That never worked. It doesn't work. Have you guys ever read in the scriptures, one man sinned, death was passed, and all? I mean, Paul writes that. I didn't write that. Paul said, look, and we think, well, that's not fair. Grace isn't fair either. Grace isn't fair. God doesn't deal with us as little individuals. Well, I'm just going to wipe one out and keep one. No, it's the system. Amos makes comparisons of Israel with other nations on how their society functioned. And God intended a very different meaning for society and worship. I mean, here they are right in the middle. You got Damascus and Gaza and Tyre and all them around. And they look exactly like them. And God said, that's not what I called you for. I called you to be different, an alternative to society. You're not supposed to look like society. You're an alternative. This is what my justice looks like. This is what my economy looks like. This is what my society looks like. And now you can't tell you any different. See, justice for us, what does justice mean in American society in 2026? It means sending a bad guy to jail. We call that a fair society. We're going to lock up the bad people, right? But we don't dare call out the whole system of injustice and deceit. I see people that's kind of, well, it might bring down the whole system. Well, bring it down because it needs to be brought down. Taking responsibility for the common good is the more important moral mandate. And when the common good is the focus, now, you know they call Virginia a commonwealth. They ought to throw that term away. It ain't been a commonwealth. I don't know if it ever has been, but you know what commonwealth means. We don't really want for the Commonwealth of Virginia to be called a commonwealth, but it is. When the common good is the focus, preaching is not about imposing guilt and shame on people, but about giving vision and encouragement to society. We don't have to live this way. There's a better vision. There's a better hope. Isn't that what the book of Hebrews is all about? There's a better way. Maybe that's why Jesus' most common metaphor for end times. You remember Jesus when he begins to talk about end times and all of this other stuff, and what's he sum it up as? As a wedding banquet. What? What kind of metaphor is that to use for end times? But isn't that what he said? Isn't that what Revelation says? I saw the bride. I saw heaven. I saw New Jerusalem like a bride. And he gives this whole metaphor, and Jesus does it. Well, a father's preparing a wedding feast for his son, and go out and invite the people in. He didn't give us the ideal of threats of hellfire and punishment. History has needed a positive and inspiring and universal vision. A vision, because if there's no vision, what happens? We know the people perish. We need a vision, a positive vision, an inspiring vision for the earth and the people. Shaming hasn't produced social change, has it? Absolutely. And you know what? It's never going to. Instead, it's produced an ocean of blowback from people who already feel unworthy. I mean, if you already feel unworthy and I put some more shame on you, what's going to happen? I mean, you wonder why there's so many people in the United States hooked on drugs. And trust me, I already know if you stop all the drugs from coming into the United States, stop them all, build a force field around it, I can bring you up here and tell you these guys know how to make it and they'll make their own, and they do. Something ain't right there. We need this positive energy which evokes a positive vision. A positive vision. So what is Amos's positive vision? That the rewards and the rejoicing that we read right there in the end, remember them, the mountains will drip sweet wine, and the hills will come apart, and the plowman overtake the reaper. Amos's positive vision here is that the rewards and the rejoicing are very much based in this earth and in this world. This wasn't a out of this world thing. And isn't that what a shepherd, a pruner of trees would understand? I mean, he would understand. I mean, when he says, I'll restore the fortunes of my people, Israel, we rebuild the desolate cities, live in them. They'll plant vineyards and drink their wine, make gardens and eat their fruit. Isn't that all here stuff? Now, it's metaphoric language, obviously, but it's real language too. Because what is our societies based on? Our societies are based on we don't have enough, we don't have enough, we don't have enough. Scarcity, right? We don't have enough. I mean, if we don't do this, if we don't do that, I mean, we're going to starve. There's not enough milk, there's not enough eggs, there's not enough oil, there's not enough gas, there's not enough firewood, there's not enough this, there's not enough that. Scarcity. But what does Jesus come on the scene doing? 2 fish, 5 loaves, and 2 fish? Pfft, that's more than enough. 12 baskets more than enough out of 2 fish. In God, there's plenty. But see, we've lost the vision and we've pushed away into scarcity. But the prophets are coming on the scene, bringing this positive energy, this vision, and he's doing it from a guy who understands the simple things of life. And he's talking about this radical unity with God and neighbor is the only way any of us truly heals and improve. Let me say that again. Radical unity with God. Not only with God, because what do we say? Man, God's with me, and me and God, we're going fishing, and me and God. No, not only with God, but with neighbor is the only way true healing comes. Now, Amos is inaugurating a revolution in our understanding of how divine love operates among us. No longer retribution or punishment, but a full reordering. How would Paul say it? A new creation, a new creature in Christ Jesus, a whole new reordering. A philosophy that says, love them into loving them so much that they love me back. Wow. Not a beating them into submission so they'll love me back, but I'm going to love them so much. Isn't this what they did with Jesus? They nailed him to the cross. And see, that love them into loving me back, that sets the pattern for all the prophets to follow. And Amos represents a strong and a clear movement away from retribution and punishment to what will become the new covenant of restorative justice. And that we will see worked out in Isaiah and in Jeremiah and in Ezekiel and, of course, in the life of Jesus. So, that is 9 chapters of Amos. 9 chapters of famous Amos. I love the book of Amos. So Tracy will stop the tape